Welcome and thank you for joining our presentation here on the Oxford Streetscape project. My name is Nathan Dyke with Jones Petrie Raffinsky, engineer here on the project, joined with Dan Baisden.
Hi, I'm Dan Baisden with the City of Fort Wayne's Community Development Division, work with neighborhood planning and activation, and we're really excited about this project because it is another outcome of the Southeast Strategy Update, which was adopted in 2021. There's been several projects underway, and Oxford Street is our next project, which we are looking to start designing with your input.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So I'll also be joined here by Andrew Cunningham as a part of our design team. Pull up the presentation here and we'll go through kind of a lot of things here about the project, and most importantly, how you can get involved in this project and provide some input that'll really drive how this project is designed and move forward with the positive momentum that's out there already. So we'll talk a little bit about the project area. Where is this project? What are the limits of it? The background and goals as to why this project exists, the existing conditions regarding what's out there today, some of the strategies that may be utilized to move those goals forward, the schedule both for community engagement, for design, and for construction, and then cover a couple questions and then provide the link here for the survey for you to be able to provide input on that for us on the project. So as Dan mentioned, this is in the southeast quadrant here of the city, and really came out of that Southeast Strategy Plan. We're looking at 1 mile of corridor along Oxford Street, starting here at the west end at Lafayette Street or US 27, continuing 1 mile to the east to South Anthony Boulevard. So as Dan mentioned, Southeast Strategy update was done in 2021, kind of a comprehensive review of the southeast quadrant of the city, and it really identified several key recommendations, one of those being improvements to commercial corridors, 4 of them in total, but one of those particular commercial corridors was the Oxford Street corridor itself. So as we look at Oxford Streets, it's really a unique mix, right, of commercial and residential uses, but the overall goal of this project and the objective is to create a pedestrian-oriented and friendly environment for the Oxford Street corridor with the following goals. So goal 1 is looking at the implementation of traffic calming solutions. So looking at ways that vehicular traffic speeds can be reduced, both for the safety of those driving those vehicles, but also for pedestrians and those utilizing those pedestrian corridors and traveling through the space. The second goal is looking at the reconstruction of curbs and walks to meet ADA standards. So it would include looking at curb ramps, looking at the walkways themselves, maybe where they don't exist, where they do need to be at, for people to truly accessibly access the space and use the space and get from one place to another. Looking at the reconstruction of deteriorated drive approaches. So if you have a drive that has, releases onto Oxford Street, looking at improving that to provide, new concrete that would provide an accessible way for pedestrians to cross it, and really looking at improvements, hopefully here from right-of-way to right-of-way limit. Goal 4 is looking at how do we create an identity for the Oxford Street corridor? How do we make this corridor stand out from other corridors? So that it really says you found the Oxford corridor, you're in the right spot. How can we do that? Through artwork, through banners, through pavement types, a variety of strategies there to go about that. Also looking at lighting, updating the street lighting to pedestrian scale. So taking the tall vehicular oriented Cobra headlights and kind of lowering those down to pedestrian scale. Goal 6 is looking at stormwater drainage improvements. So looking at, we know from being out there, at the bottom of every curb ramp, there's a puddle. So looking at resolving that so that you don't have to have rain boots on to go down a curb ramp. Looking at places where there may be standing water on sidewalks or maybe not enough flow of water on the roadway. where we can look to make improvements there to create a safer environment and a more usable environment for everyone.
So as we look to achieve those goals and create a beautiful streetscape, we have to take into account the existing conditions and analyze both the wonderful opportunities that are at play and also the challenges that we need to overcome. And so from the west side at Lafayette all the way to the east side at Anthony Boulevard, Oxford Street is fronted by a very rich community of diverse land uses from residential to commercial that really provides a wonderful solid foundation for improvement. Um, some of the challenges as we look at the existing infrastructure, it's decayed. The existing sidewalks may be non-existent, they may have heaved, they may be cracking. The curbs may or may not be there. They don't necessarily define that vehicular traffic area. We're going to be dealing with overhead utility lines that need to be navigated by both pedestrians and vehicles. And also just kind of a lack of vegetation. It's kind of a stark street that feels fairly hot due to a lack of shade. And also some of the noise tends to kind of bounce off of surfaces, so it feels like a loud environment. Those are all some challenges that we're going to seek to overcome as we achieve our goals. As you look at the existing uses that are on the street and how the street wants to respond to those uses that front to it, starting over on the west side at Lafayette Street, what we have shaded in orange depicts a commercial environment, kind of that downtown urban environment. And then as you come to the east into that central area of Oxford Street, it really lends itself to more of a neighborhood feel as you have both backyards and front yards fronting Oxford Street. And so it wants to transition into that downtown neighborhood residential feel. And then again, it transitions back on the east side over at Anthony Boulevard, back into kind of that downtown commercial urban center. And so we're going to be looking at a variety of ways that we can transition the street to really respond to those uses and bring that experience up to that next level. We're going to take a look at a few initial strategies that'll help us achieve those goals. Of course, we want to hear from you at the strategies we should be looking at, the issues that we need to be analyzing, but we'll take a look at a few initial thoughts that will help us enhance traffic safety, bring up that street aesthetic, and create a better and more safe pedestrian space. So the first strategy we'll take a look at includes curb extensions and bump outs. Now these bump outs really help to define the parallel parking spaces where the parking can and cannot be. It also helps to define and perhaps narrow the travel lane, which allows motorists to slow down and stay in their lane. It also provides a space to implement landscaping or street trees, really soften that street and provide that beautiful streetscape. It's also going to give us space to direct stormwater to and help alleviate some of the ponding that's currently there today. We're also going to look at potential lane shifting opportunities. And so this is where we would look at a specific point in the street where we'd actually shift the traffic and make the vehicular motorist change a lane or do a maneuver that forces them to automatically slow down and create a space where pedestrians could cross, or you can implement green space. But most importantly, just slow down. In one of the studies we've taken a look at, done by the Federal Highway Administration, in a scenario similar to this, where we have a two-lane, two-way, the average speed may be as high as 37 miles per hour. After you introduce a lane shift strategy, it can reduce it to something closer to 30 or 31 miles per hour, which is much more in line with the pedestrian space that we're trying to achieve here at Oxford Street. A little bit more intentional or proactive way to lower traffic is to introduce speed tables and or raised crosswalks. Now, these are essentially wide speed bumps that force the motorists to take that into account and slow down and come up and over these speed tables. It also gives the pedestrian a very clear corridor to safely cross the street. If you look at other precedent studies in areas that these have been implemented, before implementation, as high as 27% of motorists have been calculated traveling at least 10 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. After implementation of a speed table or raised crosswalk, that number drops dramatically to as low as 3% of motorists traveling over that posted speed limit, which again just raises that level of pedestrian safety and pedestrian-oriented environment. We're going to take a look very closely at the intersections and find potential areas that we can reduce the turning radius. Now, we have to be careful in order to allow larger vehicles and or trucks to make sure they can make their maneuvers. But there are going to be areas where that larger radius isn't needed, and we can pull it in to a smaller radius. What that does is it forces the motorists, as they're making a turning maneuver, to slow down and take into account their surrounding environment, which would include pedestrians. Take a look at, are there pedestrians crossing in front of me? It also reduces the distance that someone using the sidewalk has to travel across the street to safely reach the other side. And of course, we're going to look at and implement ways to incorporate greenery and street trees, soften the space, and really elevate it to a corridor that you want to spend time in to attract visitors in and help this corridor thrive. So one thing it'll do is it'll soften the space, it'll provide shade, it can reduce the ambient temperature by as much as 5 to 15 degrees as it provides shade over the large amount of pavement and sidewalk. It can also help to absorb sound as you have cars and trucks traveling through this corridor. It'll help to absorb some of the noise coming off that's right now bouncing off the hard pavement and off of the buildings. A lot of these strategies look at potential ways to narrow the lanes. Currently, along Oxford Street, we have 2 wide lanes in addition to the parallel parking spaces. Not all the parallel parking spaces are used, which really makes it feel like more of a 4-lane highway. And that's currently how drivers are gauging their speed. They're coming down this corridor like it's a 4-lane highway, which really makes it an unsafe space for pedestrians. We're going to take a look at what is that minimum lane needed for drivers to safely traverse while giving some of that space back to pedestrians, slowing the traffic and making this a great space to be. If you look at the data, a street with an average speed of 40 miles an hour is much less safe if you can reduce it by 10 or 20. The rates of pedestrians being hit by vehicles at 20 miles an hour is almost non-existent versus that 40 mile an hour average speed limit. And we're of course going to take a hard look at each intersection. How can we make those intersections a special place to be that will allow the motorists to realize they're in a special district, make them want to slow down and give pedestrians safe time to cross? So we'll look at doing that with striping, curb ramps, street pavements, and enhancements within the sidewalk. We're also going to take a look at how can we really set this district apart so that as you enter it, whether it's off of Lafayette Street or Anthony Boulevard or anywhere in between, you realize that you are in a specific and special district that really should be celebrated. That forces you to take into account your surroundings, whether you're a vehicular motorist or pedestrian, and slow down and enjoy the space that you're in. Now we're going to take a look at doing that, whether it's via street trees or banners on lighting or simple columns, but something that gives you that visual cue that you're entering into the Oxford Street Corridor District. And now I'll hand it back over to Nathan as he'll talk about potential opportunities for ways that you can engage and what the next steps and schedule is for the project.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So most importantly, the next step is getting participation from those that know the corridor best. So we do have a survey open that we'll have the link for on the next page here, but have a survey out there that has some questions, just getting your thoughts on the corridor itself. How is it today? What are some potential improvements? What are some needs? So really looking to get that feedback, as that's really going to drive the design for this corridor and help make this corridor the best it can be for the Oxford community. So that survey will be open here till the end of the month, so it'll be closing here on October 1st. And then at that point, once that survey is closed, we'll take that information and gather that, begin to analyze that, and really understand what it is that we need to be looking at. From that, we'll be developing conceptual designs for those improvements, and then looking to present both a presentation of the survey results and what we heard, and the conceptual designs here in mid-November. And then from those conceptual designs, we'll move into the design process, which will take through the calendar year of 2024. And then in 2025 will be the anticipated beginning of construction. So within 2025, we're anticipating to construct phase 1, which you can see here is the westernmost leg of the corridor running from Lafayette Street to Hannah Street. And then upon completion of that construction, into the future would occur phase 2 and phase 3. So phase 2 goes from Hannah Street to the east to Oliver Street, and then from Oliver Street further eastward to Anthony Boulevard to complete that 1 mile corridor. So a couple questions that we have gotten. There are survey crews out there on that corridor right now gathering data. For the topography of that area, the existing utilities, and what's occurring there. So if you see them, that's what they're gathering to help kind of create a base plan for us to design upon once we have your feedback. So, and then again, the design process will be beginning. It hasn't started yet. It'll begin once we have that input. We really need your input to help us know exactly what we need to look at. What are the things that we need to resolve? What are the ways we can improve this corridor the best? So there on the screen at the bottom, you can see the website there, www.oxfordstreetproject.com. When you go to that website, you'll be able to find information about the project. You'll be able to find this presentation, and then you'll also find the survey to be able to provide your input on. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate you looking at that survey and completing that to provide us the valuable information we need. And we'll look forward to seeing that. So thank you very much.